Welcome along, my aspiring allies, and thank you for joining me on this most recent episode of the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. Today, I am joined by Marsha Powell, and Marsha is the CEO of BelEve, a UK-based charity, and also a social entrepreneur. Now, her charity is one that supports girls between the ages of 8 and 22 when it comes to the transitions that they go through in terms of education and entering the workplace. Now, she is absolutely a champion for empowerment of women and girls, but we also talked about her move into talking about workplace readiness, both from a personal human perspective and also the gaps that exist within workplaces that she would like us to close when it comes to making our workplaces the types of places that can really be ready for the ambitious young women that will be entering them. So, you know the drill. Sit back, relax, and get comfortable in whichever way works best for you. And please welcome Marsha Powell to the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. Filtered, real conversation, which is what I want, right? This is the conversation that we want to be having. We don't want to have any more platitudes or vagueness. Like, let's call everything out for what it is and let's talk about what are we going to do about it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Love. So Marsha Powell, welcome to the Speaking of Inclusion podcast. So I'm really excited to kick this off because I know we have met through kind of introductions to our kind of MD to MD leadership network, which for anybody listening along, I'll put a link in the show notes as well in case anyone's interested in that. But I saw Marsha give an interview at one of their events, and it was amazing just to learn everything about what you're up to. And I was like, yes, this is a conversation that people need to hear more from. So you are kind of, I guess you would consider yourself to be like a social entrepreneur as well as the CEO for BelEve. So tell us a bit about, what is the work that you kind of currently do? And then we're going to talk about how did you get into that as well. But so what is it that you actually do?
So to put a pin in it, I've been running a girls' charity for 14 years. And for 14 years, we've been about confidence and empowerment. So we work with girls between 8 to 22, primarily around transition. So making sure they're ready for the next transitional stage in their lives. And now, for those who don't know, girls typically, well, humans typically transition 4 times between 8 to 22.
Right.
So it's key stage 1 to key stage 2. So between 7 and 8, you're transitioning in the educational system. And then you transition from primary to secondary school. So that's another transition. Then you transition at post 16. So you're making a decision. Am I staying on that sixth form? Am I going to college? Am I going to do an apprenticeship? And then you transition out of that sphere of higher education into work. So there's 4 transitional stages that a girl goes through, and they're quite critical, actually. So as an organisation, we've been really focusing on making sure they're confident and they're empowered to get through the next steps in their lives, right? But we're 14 years old, and as an organisation, we've made a decision that, do you know what, confidence is great, empowerment is great, but it's not enough.
Yeah.
Because what we have seen is ambitious girls coming through our charity over the last 14 years, but a lot of them are not ready for the next steps in their transitional journey.
Yeah.
Which means, you have disengagement, you have a high population of young women who are not in education or employment or training, which is called NEETs.
Yeah.
Or you have a lot of young women who are ambitiously searching for an opportunity, but doors are not opening.
Yeah.
And when the doors are opened, actually they're not ready to step into the door and sustain themselves within that environment. So that has led us on to not just focusing on inspiring girls and their future, but getting them ready to step into their future. So we are focusing on the readiness gap. So as an organisation, readiness is a huge thing we're involved in, and looking at the systems that the girls are evolving into through their transition, or and how do we ensure that those systems are embracing the girls, and are ready for those young women as they come through the pipeline.
Yeah, I think that's such a critical distinction, actually, isn't it? And I love that you yourself, I mean, 14 years having done that, you've clearly got like the evidence behind you to say, well, we know what we're doing when it comes to confidence, we know what we're doing when it comes to empowerment, and we've identified actually, you know, enough case studies now to go, here's the next thing that actually needs to happen. So I love that it's all really evidence-based, really practical, and you're yourself thinking about the evolution of the work that you do, which is amazing. And it ties in really perfectly, which again, you know, is the fact that you're seeing the evidence that brings this out too in the conversations I have within businesses. And they're not, it's not through a gendered lens, but they're specifically talking about, you know, the younger generation, Gen Z people not being work ready. And I think that's a really interesting statement because, you know, it's kind of like there are so many facets, and you've already kind of touched upon that in the sense of, okay, there's a person being work ready, but there's an organization being ready to receive, right? And then there's all sides of that. So I want to put a pin in that though, because that I think is going to be the big discussion, and I don't want to jump in too soon before we've got to learn a bit more about you. So as people are listening and watching along, hold that thought, we're going to come back to that. But what I'm really curious to know is, obviously you're talking now about the evolution of where you are 14 years on, but how did all this start? What happened 14 years ago that made you think, do you know what, this is the current gap that needs addressing?
15 years ago, I was working for the Financial Services Authority as a HR business partner, and at the time, the organisation was going through transformational change because it was demerging. So now we have the FCA and the PRA, and the PRA sits within the Bank of England. And my job was going to Bank of England. But within that time, my mum also died. Oh. Yeah, so she died really early. She died at 52 and died within 10 weeks. So I had transformation in my life whilst I was leading transformation in an organisation. And at the time, my daughter was 10 and she's now 25. And I saw changes within my daughter at the time. But because of the critical change within my life, it gave me an opportunity to pause and think, what do I really want to do? And I had been creating BelEve before my mum became sick. But it made me just realise, like, you either got to do this or not do this.
Yeah.
But I also had a blueprint, right? I had a blueprint within myself in terms of going into an organisation at 19, social mobility, low social mobility, come from a council block, only GCSEs, and navigating myself within this organisation, leaving with a degree and a master's, having achieved my dream job at the time, which was becoming a HR business partner, when I was told administrators don't do this in this organisation. So I defied the odds as a young woman, and actually as a black woman. Yep. And I'm not going to hide from that. But also, at the time, I had a 10-year-old who was transitioning into primary school, into secondary school. But there was a critical point in her journey whereby she was going to get guidance. and got kicked out for being disruptive.
Ooh.
And I was like, okay, what is this? Um, Actually, I think I could create something that's quite similar, but actually embraces girls where they're at
Mm.
from as young as 8. So that was really some of the ideology around BelEve, but also what I identified prior to leaving my full-time job was that there was a gap in the market whereby the lens was heavily focused on boys in terms of knife crime, in terms of being neat, but there was nothing really I could find 15 years ago outside of girl guidance that tangibly support girls.
Mm.
Um, and I am a bit of a curious person, and also my ambition always has me doing things that people say I can't do. So 14 years ago, I left my job and started BelEve from the dining room table.
Nice. Nice. And there's so much that you've summarized there, and thank you for sharing all of that. In that, like, and I like the way that you just ended with, and I left my job and started it from a dining room table. Whereas anybody who's ever done anything that involves starting any form of charity or business or anything like it's never that simple. It doesn't just happen like that. But you got to put yourself in it and you've got to get on with it. And that's
Absolutely.
what I'm hearing. You were like, if I'm doing this, I'm doing this properly.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. And it sounds to me as well like there's a lot of like consistent themes that come through here, like you're talking about the transitions that girls specifically go through, and then you're talking about your own transitions. And I really like when you were talking about your daughter and you're like, okay, so she got kicked out of guides for being disruptive, and I'm kind of hearing there actually, well, is it, one person's disruptive is another person's just non-conformist, right? And I'm wondering, we've got a system that is set up to serve a purpose, but you're seeing something that system doesn't serve the purpose for all girls, and you're like,
Absolutely.
okay, so when you don't fit into that mold, where do you go if that's the only thing, right?
Absolutely.
And what I really like as well, the acknowledgement there that, I mean, and absolutely boys need that support too, like, because there are specific needs, I guess, that are taking place in there when you're talking about things like knife crime and things like there are needs that boys specifically will need to stop them finding themselves in certain pathways, and that's different. But I'm also kind of getting a sense underneath that it's the silence that exists and what's available for girls, right? Because I'm not going to say that girls don't get involved in stuff like that too, because they absolutely do, right?
Yeah.
However, I guess it's less publicized, less prevalent, maybe less likely. And it is just that silence of, well, okay, if you're not problematic in that way, there's nothing for you, so you just got to figure it out for yourself. And there's this one option, and if that doesn't work for you, well, sorry, that's on you. And what I'm hearing, what you were just like, no, we're not having that.
Absolutely not. And that was actually the thing. It was like, okay, when I did my research, because originally I just wanted to set up a mentoring program. And when I did my research, there was very little gender-specific mentoring programs in the UK. But if you look to the US, there was loads. There was absolutely loads. And I was like, okay, like, what is this? And again, I think, we talk about feminism, right? So people are, oh, so well, you're a feminist then. We're just a lover for girls. And I do stand on, I believe we should have a fair world for all human beings, but equality doesn't exist. And I want to contribute to moving that needle forward. One, because I have a young woman that lives in my house that I am growing, and I want to demonstrate that actually, yes, barriers do exist, but you don't have to accept that that barrier is going to be there for you forever. We can work towards smashing the glass ceilings. We can work towards ensuring that you have access and opportunities. But at the same time, I'm growing a young boy as well. So I've had two ends of the spectrum in terms of how the system treats girls and boys unfairly. But my passion was to just ensure that girls between the age of 8 to 22 have the support, have that access, have the readiness to thrive in the next critical stages in their lives, because it's so important.
Totally. And I can also see in here as well that you were doing it as well through the lens of like, you can also foresee the chapters that were going to come next for your daughter as well, because they were your chapters, right? So, you know, even in your own experience, you were talking then about how you had to overcome the obstacles in the workplace of like, yeah, but as an administrator, you weren't going to go into, like, in our organization, you don't become an HR business partner, and you're like, what? But you were saying, as a Black woman, there were barriers that existed, and you knew then for your child, well, those barriers haven't gone anywhere. So absolutely. I know what comes next. How do I change that?
Absolutely. And, you know, this is a legacy organisation, right? My mum died and we stand on our mum's name. You know, if my mum didn't die, do I think I'd be doing this full time? Maybe not, right? Maybe not. But my daughter has gone through secondary school, smashed secondary school, gone into university, and my daughter said, Mum, if I'm going to go to university, I'm going to get it first. And I looked at her and I was like, nice. Okay, you're going to get it first. The likelihood is that you'll get a 2-1. And she was like, no, if I'm going to back up there, I'm 100% going to get it first. My daughter went to university in COVID. Yeah. 6 months I had by myself. She was back after 6 months doing it online. Did her dissertation. I was like, has she done a dissertation in like 4 weeks? I took months to do my dissertation. And she came out with the first.
Yeah, nailed it.
I was like, huh? Yeah. She came out with her first. But her access was she already had a job. So she's worked at BelEve 4 or 5 years, also started her own business whilst working at BelEve. And last week, Tuesday, said, Mum, I hang up my shoes. I've done 5 years. I'm now going to full-time focus on my business.
Yeah. Right. Now, is that not the dream of what everybody wants for their kids, which is we give them as much as we can from our own nest, and then they create it for themselves and they take it on and do something more?
Absolutely. Yeah. But we need to replicate that.
Yeah.
And that's my thing. Like, I did a LinkedIn post and said, look, my daughter's privileged, right? My daughter's never had to think, where's my support network? Never had to think, can I navigate this network system? Never had to think, the door's not going to open for me, because she has me as her mother.
Yeah.
But I want that for every young girl, because they deserve it.
Yeah.
So it's, how do we do this? How do we build this ecosystem that gives access and opportunities and builds the readiness in girls so that when they go in the room, they're seen and they're supported and they can navigate those spaces.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And then that kind of brings us back around to what we were talking at the top. So it is, and I love that you've made that distinction, that we could be individualistic about this and be like, well, if we all took care of our own kids, everything would be fine. And actually, we also know that that's just not the case, because if that was the case, the world would be a different place right now. So we do need community. You know, we do need support, and some people need more support than others, like you said, because access does and doesn't exist in different places for different people, right? We have to acknowledge that to be true. And I noticed that when you speak about this, like, clearly your passion for this comes through. Like, there is no dilution. You are here standing 10 toes down, and this is what I believe in, and this is what we need to do to change it. And so, and when we spoke before, you described yourself as like an extremist for girls' empowerment. And I love that. I love that you are like, there is no messing about here. This is it. So what does that mean to you?
The reality is, I gave up a really good job, right? To do this, and have been doing this for 14 years. So I'm unwavering. I'm committed to girls' work, to ensuring that girls have the same opportunities as their counterpart, which is male. Right? And I'm committed to their progression. as much as I'm committed to my own daughter's progression. And last week, we had International Women's Day at Meta. And I invited our first young leadership board to come and talk about their experiences. Now, I met these girls when they were 15. They're now 21 and 22. So they're into the workplace. And they blew the whole event away. Why? Because they are all ambitious. One's working at Vodafone, one's working at JP Morgan, one's working at Goldman Sachs, one's in a consultancy. So they're all in good jobs. But all of them said, you know what? I'm telling you, my first career insight day at 15 with BelEve opened my eyes. One of them went to Cambridge. She said, look, I didn't think I could go to Cambridge. I got there through this community supporting me, giving me the confidence, giving me the empowerment, connecting me with a mentor.
Yep.
So again, the progression can be multiplied if we build the ecosystems, if we are committed to the progressions of young girls. Yep. And for me, quality of what we deliver, the standards that we hold, and the outcomes that we expect for the girls is what I'm about. You know, every girl deserves a mentor. We mentor over 200 girls a year.
Nice.
I am extreme.
Yeah. What you think? There's 200 girls a year over the last 14 years. That is a lot of girls that will have gone on to achieve excellent things. Like the things that you're listing there are like, I mean, that's career goals for so many people. And I guess those achievements then are at varying extents as well across the group, because they have to be. And that's okay, because like everybody wants something different. Not everybody wants the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But what I'm hearing in what you're talking there, it's acknowledgement that the disempowerment kind of exists through that lack of insight or lack of knowledge, because again, it comes back to, we just don't know what we don't know, right? So if I don't know that those types of job opportunities exist, or I don't know like how you get into it. I mean, I so like you, I was a HR business partner when I was in employment as well. And I didn't come out of school thinking I'm going to be an HR business partner. I didn't know what that was. I had no idea, right? I fell into it essentially, like through you get into the workplace and you're like, what's all that people stuff? Right. But we don't know what we don't know. So to have that community, to have mentors, and then this is that direct translation into how workplaces can step up, isn't it? In that you have these tools within your organization to make sure that everybody does understand and have access and opportunity, right?
Absolutely. And I was having a conversation last week. I went to an event and I also showed another HR person. And I said, do you know how I found HR? And he was like, what? And I said, work experience. The power of work experience. I got an opportunity to do work experience at Lambeth Council in the HR department. And I was like, oh my God, what is this?
Yeah.
I want to do this job. And I think I was 17 at the time. And I was like, how do you get into HR? Because I really want to do this job. And they gave me the pathway. You need to do your CPP. Then you go on to do your CIPD. I was like, okay, cool. And I did that. I went to Croydon College and I did my CPP. And I funded it myself in the evening. And I was like, okay, cool. First step. But again, it's that. We need to give the insight. We need to ensure that girls are given the opportunities to have work experience, to have internships, to build the skills and the networks and the navigation tools that enables them to sustain themselves when they do get into employment. Because, you know, getting a job is one thing, right? Being able to retain that job, and that's on both sides, is another. And we know this. So, yeah.
Yeah. And as you were saying that, what kind of stood out to me as well is the accessibility piece as well, in that actually, like, work experience, a lot of young people find work experience through their parents' connections, right? It's through who your parents or your family or your family friends know that can get you those opportunities. And that's where that kind of socioeconomic divide widens, and all the other gaps that already exist become more apparent, right? Because if we don't have access to those networks, it's just not happening.
You don't get the insight. And again, that's why, even in terms of us as an organisation, we ensure that we do Career Insight Days regularly, because it's important that girls gain insight to what is available. And I say to girls, look, if you want to be in marketing, you should be coming to every single Career Insight Day. If you want to be in HR, because every organisation has a marketing department, has a HR department, has an accounts department. The core functions of an organisation, they're going to have. The technical elements of the organisation is going to be about what the organisation does from a product or service perspective. But the core functions are always going to be in the organisation. So you need to find the organisation you connect with and your values are aligned with. So don't ever say, oh no, I'm not going to go because it's not a marketing organizer. No.
Yeah. And that's the type of, like you said, that's the type of insight that perhaps as a younger girl you wouldn't naturally make that connection, would you? You're looking for the direct, obvious signals. And we don't, because again, if you don't know how a business works, you don't know how a business works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I want to pick up as well on the empowerment piece as well, because over the last 14 years, I reckon you must have seen changes to the ways in which people are either kind of empowered or not empowered. So what are the shifts that you've seen over those 14 years?
I think as women, there's been a shift. There's been a shift in us taking up space, which also has shone a light for younger women to think, oh, I can do this. I can be self-employed. I can have a side hustle. So we've got a lot more women in the entrepreneurial space, right? Which is great. Because effectively, we want to be building capabilities, which I believe we have over the last 15 years. You know, leadership capabilities. We need more female leaders. So our lens and focus is on leadership. Because if you want something to be different, then you have to build that difference in your systems. And also ensure that girls know that they have the capabilities or the ability to be in spaces and places and to be leaders. And when we say leaders, what do we really mean? Right?
Yeah.
Because we're not talking about being a leader of a FTSE 100 company. We're actually talking about, firstly, can you lead yourself?
Yeah.
Are you self-assured? Can you communicate who you are as a first basis? And that is what we have been building over the last 14 years. And I think that is why we are seeing a lot more girls confident enough to say, actually, I am going to be an asset manager. Actually, I am going to be a firefighter. Actually, because we have created space where they believe that they can. So ambition is not a problem. We have not got a problem with ambition because we have ambitious young women. And over the 14 years, that is what I have seen and I can stand on. Like, the question isn't, do we have enough ambitious young women? The question is, does the systems or has the systems moved or shifted at the same pace as women that is now allowing or enabling the space to hold them as they come through?
Yeah.
Are we ensuring that we're giving them the tools to be successful in this space?
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And this comes back to that question, doesn't it, of we are doing the work to empower young women. We are doing the work for them to harness their own ambition, to know what they want, to connect with their values. Okay, and then the flip side to that is, how are our systems and organizations and institutions doing the work as well?
Absolutely.
To be ready for a work, we talked about workforce readiness, and this is what I wanted to come back to. Okay, so there's the one point about our young people workplace ready, and that is going to be to varying degrees, but now our workplace is young person ready, right? Because something I often see as well in organizations, you get ambitious young people coming in, particularly young women, and organizations don't know how to handle that. Or assumptions are made about a person's potential because of their age, which, let's face it, that's ageism, because there are lots of people with bucket loads of potential, and if you aren't set up for them to step into that, you're never going to release it, regardless of how much you might say you want it.
Absolutely. And again, I think people have it, right? I think we have a readiness gap on both sides. And let's talk about Gen Zs, right? A lot of people think Gen Zs are problematic because they come with a different want and need, and they are very articulate and very outspoken, and they vote with their feet. Whereas we were thinking job for life. Actually, what I'll do is I'll stay as long as I can and I'll move myself up. No. Gen Zs are like, listen, I've got a time frame because I'm about my money. And I'm also about working for an organisation that ethically is aligned to my values. Right? So there's been a shift with those who are coming through the pipeline. But has there been a shift in the organisations in terms of being able to cultivate these young people? Because actually they are the future. As we've seen, even in the last 18 months, how AI has changed how we communicate, how we navigate, how we do business. Yeah. So everything has to be changing at the pace in which movement is happening in different spheres of life, right? But again, I go back to how ready are organisations to receive this difference, and also how ready are these young careers to go into a space that actually isn't ready for them.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the disconnect, and that's what you're talking about as the next phase of BelEve, isn't it? Is that's the gap and the disconnect that really needs addressing. And I'm in complete agreement with you there. And even when you were saying, we're coming from at one end with, we have a generation of people where it was a job for life, and that worked, that was great. And now we're at the other end where we are talking more about multiple jobs, portfolio careers. Like, there's more people being more entrepreneurial because they are inspired, I guess, by influencers and other work opportunities that never existed before. So the avenues are different. And I think it can be something that if we're in the mindset of traditional transactional job for life working, we're going to lose a lot of skills that really can add a lot of value, right?
Absolutely. And for me, this is the conversations that I'm having with corporates now, right? If you do not build your pipeline of diverse young people early, you are going to have a problem with your workforce, because there are a lot less young people who want to work for someone. So it doesn't matter if you think, oh, well, we're a multi-billion-pound organisation that turns over and we've got this market share. Without a workforce, you cannot do that. AI is great, but it cannot do everything. So we need to be building that pipeline, but making sure they're ready and understand the roles that they will play within your ecosystem, and making sure there's great career pathways
Yep.
for these young people.
Yeah.
Or we're gonna get to a crisis point having not addressed the problem early enough.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. I see that echoed as well I mean, and more generally, this isn't just about young people, but more generally in organizations when, you'll have a look at their hiring practices and you're like, it's obvious when you can see a lack of diversity through hiring practices, right? And the pushback is always, yeah, but we just can't find people. And I think like it's such a cop-out statement, because humans of all characteristics and demographics exist, right?
Absolutely.
They all
Absolutely.
exist. And it's what you're talking about is it's actually, if we aren't addressing the pipeline problem, that's why you can't find the people to fit your roles, because we're not looking downstream enough to see how are people
Right.
getting to the point where they want to work either for us or have the skills for us to be able to select from that pool.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also, there's an organisation came to me and said, "Oh, we want to work with you, and we want to do a career insight day." And I said, "Okay," but the girls who come on the career insight day, we want to transition them to possibly apply for our graduate roles. So it's a long term strategy, right? So I said, "Okay, cool. What happens in between the career insight day and then being able to apply for the graduate role?" And they were like, I said, "Yeah." I said, "Because you need to be supporting them during the period whereby they are going to apply for the graduate role." And then look, let me just say this. I've been in this organisation. There's not a lot of people that look like me, right? So I come through the door and I don't see anyone who looks at me. What happens? I might opt out if I'm not confident enough, right? So I come to your Create Insight Day, but I've never had someone who's done an assessment centre. So you're asking me to apply for your graduate program, but there's no one coaching me and mentoring me to be ready for that. So do you see where the gap is? So even though my intention is to be in your organisation, there's already a barrier for me because I don't have access to the information that my counterparts might have. I don't have the support, the navigation tools. So even though your intentions are great, there's a flaw in the process that's not considering
Absolutely.
the diversity in the pool that you want to bring on.
Yeah, absolutely. And what comes with that is, you're kind of specifically calling out there that different groups of people have different needs to get to the same starting point.
Absolutely.
Everybody talks about this level playing field. It's just not. And it's about understanding the work that organizations can help and contribute to redress that balance.
Absolutely.
And set themselves up to access that talent. That's the point. It's not an altruistic act. Like, it's a selfish act. When you are the one helping to readdress that, you're the one that's going to reap the benefits.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. But first we have to acknowledge that not all girls are prepared in the same way. Not all girls are exposed to the same opportunities. All girls are not going to be able to access the same opportunities or navigate the same spaces in the same way.
Yeah. And that comes out in the example you shared about girl guiding, right, with your daughter. Not everybody fits into the environment that has been created because it's been created in a specific way.
Absolutely.
Around specific characteristics, specific behaviors. And if you don't conform, you don't belong. And that is just a microcosm of an organization, right? Yeah. And I really like you pointed out as well, like calling out organizations that those signals of safety as well that need to exist, that it's all very well saying these words,
Yeah.
But then when you invite someone in, if that person is the first person to look like you or to behave in a certain way or to have a certain characteristic, then that's terrifying. Being the first is, we can all relate to that, I'm sure, that just being the first. And if you are then walking into an organization of 100 people and you're like one of, you know, even just 2 or 3 black people in an organization of white people, it feels a certain type of way, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah. When we think of through the gendered lens, if you know, if you're a young girl walking into an environment that is just a sea of men, grown men as well, if you know your first job and you have to navigate that, that's tough. That's an ask.
Yeah. And that's why I think the work that we do at BelEve is really important, and that partnership piece with corporates is really, really important, because again, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't change what you can't see, because we do become blind in practice. However, if you're committed to change, and understanding the intersectionalities of human beings, then you will get on board. So as an organisation going forward, our positioning with our partners is, look, we want you to agree to be in our ecosystem but play a role in that ecosystem. Can you be a gate opener? Can you be a pipeline builder? Do you want to look at your policies to influence change from a policy perspective? If it's yes to one of those, then we're happy to work with you. Because right about now, we are about transformation. We are about building systems that hold girls, that give them access and opportunities, that enable them to thrive, to become leaders within the spaces they choose to become leaders in. Is that you? If it's you, then we're happy to have a conversation and to work alongside you. But at this point, as a charity, we are not asking for support. What we're asking for is partnership.
Yeah.
And that's important, right? That's signal skin in the game. Yeah. That's it.
So I've got a bit of feedback. Marsha, hang on. There we go. Yeah, that's better. So yeah, what I'm kind of hearing there in like, this is the call to arms, right? The call to action. Like, if this is resonating, if you're thinking, do you know what, there is more that we can be done, like step into this opportunity to be a partner, to put action and money where your mouth is, to be more than paying lip service to a desire to want something to be better. And I know that in partnering with charities such as BelEve, like, it's through the lens of kind of empowering and closing that readiness gap for girls. However, you can't take steps to address that without it being beneficial for people outside of that group as well. Like, it's not a singular change action, as it ripples.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we want a fairer world. We say we want a fairer world. And today, I believe there's 2 genders. Like, in terms of, there's a female, a male. I know we've got non-binary. But everyone should feel they have access, dependent on their skill, their capabilities, their will and their desire, not based on gender, not based on race, because we're in the 21st century. Why are we still talking about this? But we are. And I see that as, that is an absolute, we are. But what we're going to do differently. Yeah. If we're talking about systemic change, how do we ensure that we move towards fairer systems that give access to all and opportunities to all, that supports all in thriving in whatever space they want to be in. From a career perspective, from an educational perspective, you know, and that's what we're essentially talking about. We're talking about the educational system. We're talking about the career system, organisational systems. You know, health comes into this as well. You know, so it's all the systems that enables an individual to be rounded. But as an organisation, we're saying, look, we work with schools. Schools, let us support you. Let us partner with you in getting these girls ready. Organisations, let us partner with you in building your pipeline and making sure that the girls are ready so that we reduce the readiness gap and reduce the access gap. So it sounds quite simple, right?
I mean, when you say it like that, it sounds so simple, doesn't it? But what I'm hearing there is like people talk always, don't they, about we just hire on merit. Everything's based on merit. And what we're saying is merit is just a mythical thing, right? Let's create actual merit. Let's remove barriers. Let's really give people all of the opportunities. And then let's see what happens, you know, right? If everybody gets to really have a good crack, like just think how incredible that could be for our economy and for our happiness as a state, and like, you know, the interactions and workplace, like it has so much potential, doesn't it, beyond the kind of initial thinking.
Okay.
So thank you so much for sharing that, Marsha. So what I would like to ask is, if people are hearing this and they're thinking definitely partnerships sound good for us, I'm going to apologize if those of you that can hear my cat yowling away, she has joined it again. How can people get in touch with you? What are the best places that they can find you and make contact?
Okay, so we have an amazing website, and at the moment we still have our landing page up from International Women's Day. So we did lean into Give to Gain, and we are encouraging people to pledge, right? Pledge what you can give. And when we say give, we're talking about your time, we're talking about your expertise. Can you be a gate opener? Can you be a pipeline builder? Can you? Because again, we cannot do this alone. We want to build an ecosystem of people who are as committed as me to change. So you can come onto our website, which is BelEve, www.belevuk.org. BelEve is BelEve, no I, UK.org. We are on LinkedIn. We are on all socials. But also, you can come to our office, because we have an office on the High Street in Brockley, South London, which is where I was born and raised. You can pop in.
I love that. I've got to say, I got a little bit of Fresh Prince vibes there. You know, it's where I was born and raised. I was like on Brockley High Street. Love it. But I love the open invitation there. Come along, talk to us, find us, connect with us in all of the ways, including boots on the ground, because that's what you do, right?
We are on the ground.
Yeah, love. And for those of you that are driving along listening to this perhaps, and you're thinking, oh gosh, I didn't get that, don't worry, it's going to be in the show notes, so you can find it in there. All of the links will be in there as well, so you have no excuses for not being able to reach out if that's what you're after. And to wrap things up, Marsha, it's been a delight to have you along, but is there anything else that you came to say that you haven't had an opportunity to say?
What I want to say is, if you are a woman who has a spare 90 minutes every single month, we have young women who really want to connect with a role model. So mentoring is what we do as a backbone, because we believe through mentorships, access and opportunities come. And we want more girls to have mentors. So if you can, please apply to be a mentor.
Love. Marsha Powell, thank you so much for joining me on the
Thank you.
Inclusion podcast.
Thank you.